It was a funeral like any other, but something strange happened when Max, my dog, who had always been calm and quiet, started barking uncontrollably in front of the coffin. No one understood what was happening until a man asked me, "Why did the priest get so nervous?" What we discovered afterwards completely changed everyone's perspective. And my life was never the same. My life had never been particularly exciting. A routine job, few surprises, and a stability that, while predictable, gave me a comforting sense of normalcy. Max, my dog, was my only constant companion. He was 8 years old and had always been a noble, balanced, and obedient dog. Every time we walked in the park, Max behaved impeccably, and though he couldn't talk, I always knew what he wanted to tell me with his body language. It was as if we understood each other without words, a special bond you only form after years of being side by side with a beloved being. Death wasn't something I had dealt with much in my life. Up until that point, I had only attended funerals of elderly people, neighbors, or distant acquaintances. When I heard about the death of Don Gregorio, an old acquaintance from the neighborhood, I didn't think much of it. We weren't close, but I thought it would be respectful to attend his funeral. The day of the funeral, everything seemed normal. The cemetery, perched on top of a hill, was surrounded by trees, and a soft wind blew. There was an eerie calm in the air, but I didn't give it much importance. Arriving with Max, I tied him to a quiet corner, as I usually did. He was used to accompanying me everywhere. While I watched the ceremony from afar, something began to feel strange. During the service, I noticed that the priest looked uncomfortable. He spoke quickly, as if he wanted to finish as soon as possible. I tried to follow the sermon, but I couldn't stop noticing his trembling hands and the sweat on his forehead. Then everything changed when Max started barking. At first, I thought he was just unsettled by being in a new place, but I quickly realized that his attention was fixed on the coffin. It was as if he was trying to tell me something only he could sense. A man sitting near me noticed the same thing. "That dog knows something," he said softly, as if talking to himself. I looked at him, surprised by his comment. "What do you mean?" he asked. Without taking his eyes off the priest, he replied, "The priest is nervous. Something's wrong here. Don't you see? Animals always know when something's off." At first I didn't want to believe it. What could possibly be wrong at a funeral? Don Gregorio was an old man. His death wasn't unexpected. However, Max's growing restlessness and the priest's behavior began to plant doubts in my mind. I couldn't just ignore what was happening. As the priest continued speaking, the man beside me kept murmuring, "Dogs can sense things we can't. They have a special connection to the other world, closer to nature, more pure." Those words made me think. Could it be possible that Max was sensing something we weren't aware of? With the funeral coming to an end, family and friends started to leave. But I couldn't walk away. Something in me refused to abandon the mystery. Max kept staring at the coffin, his barking quieter now but still restless, pacing in circles as if something invisible was disturbing him. That's when the man approached me again. "Are you going to investigate?" he asked in a low voice. I wasn't sure what to say. Investigate what? Why would a nervous priest and an unsettled dog be enough to raise suspicion? But something inside me, a feeling I couldn't shake, drove me to stay and seek answers. I told the man yes, that I was going to find out what was going on. We stayed behind, watching as the priest hastily closed the coffin and left in a hurry that didn't match a typical funeral. The following days were a true test of patience. I went back to the cemetery several times, only to find the same eerie silence I had felt during the funeral. Max kept barking on each visit, as if the coffin emitted an energy he couldn't ignore. I decided to speak with the priest, but every time I tried to arrange a meeting, he would slip away, saying he was busy or that he had nothing more to add. Things got stranger when I started digging into Don Gregorio's life. There wasn't anything particularly mysterious about his recent years, but as I delved into his past, I discovered he had been involved in shady business dealings when he was younger. Something that hadn't been mentioned at his funeral. I spoke to some of his old friends, and they all seemed to know more than they were willing to share. As I uncovered more, Max became more agitated. I was convinced my dog knew something that I couldn't understand. With every new detail I uncovered about Don Gregorio, the mystery grew darker. Max never stopped barking when we visited the cemetery, as if trying to guide me toward something deeper, something lying beneath the surface. One night, after a particularly frustrating day of research, I decided to return to the cemetery, this time with Max completely unleashed. If there was something there he was trying to show me, I was going to find out. Upon arriving, Max ran straight to Don Gregorio's grave. He began digging desperately, while I, flashlight in hand, tried to understand what was happening. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the shadows. It was the priest, with a terrified look on his face. "What are you doing here?" he shouted, his trembling voice betraying his fear. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice firm despite my confusion. The priest, visibly nervous, hesitated before answering. "You shouldn't be here. What you're looking for. You shouldn't be looking for it. It's dangerous." His answer only made me want to know more. "What do you know? What really happened at that funeral?" I pressed, as Max continued barking relentlessly. The priest finally broke. "There are things we shouldn't try to understand. Don Gregorio wasn't the man everyone thought he was. He did bad things, things he tried to hide until the very end. And now, his soul isn't at peace. The dog knows. Animals always know." The priest's confession hit me like lightning. Max, with his sharp instincts, had been trying to warn me from the start. What had initially seemed like strange behavior from my dog was actually a desperate attempt to alert me to something deeper, something beyond our understanding. There was a spiritual unrest, a trace of darkness Don Gregorio had left behind, and Max had sensed it all along. After that night, the priest and I performed a second ritual, this time to cleanse Don Gregorio's soul and release him from any evil that might be holding him back. Max, who had been my guide throughout this process, watched silently, as if he could finally rest. The ritual was conducted in secret, and though there was no visible manifestation, we both knew something had changed. For the first time since the funeral, Max was calm. Returning to my normal life wasn't easy. Every time I walked through the park with Max, I wondered what else he could sense that I couldn't see. I had learned to trust his intuition in a completely new way. He was no longer just my dog. He was my protector, my guardian in the spiritual world. The experience changed me deeply. I could no longer see the world the same way. Max was still the same loving dog as always, but now I looked at him with a new respect. He had been my guide through something most people couldn't comprehend. Since then, I've paid more attention to the small details, to the signs the world gives us that we often ignore. In the end, what I learned is that there's so much more to this world than what we can see with our eyes. Sometimes the answers don't come from where we expect, and in those moments, we have to trust those who have a purer connection to the invisible. Max taught me to listen, not just with my ears but with my heart. Because there are things only love, loyalty, and intuition can understand. Life offers us unexpected lessons, and many times our most loyal companions, like Max, are the ones who guide us through the darkest moments. If I learned anything from this experience, it's that love and loyalty know no boundaries, not even between the world of the living and the dead.